Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In this particular video, we are going to discuss about one of the most popular optional subject chosen by UPSC aspirants these days, and that is anthropology. In this particular video, we are going to discuss that what actually anthropology the subject is all about, why it makes sense to choose it as an optional, one of the optional in the UPSC examination, what are the challenges students generally face while dealing with this particular optional, and what should be our approach to understand this subject, and not only understand this but have a better approach to write answers and then maximize our chances of success in the UPSC mains examination, especially as we know that in the last stage when you have the interview and when all the entire marks are added, you see the optional marks plays a very important role, and higher the marks you have scored in the optional, higher is the chances you will make in the cutoff list, and also you will have a better rank as well. Now, before understanding about the topic and about the subject and its relevance for UPSC and how we should prepare for UPSC, if we try to briefly understand about the subject itself, that is anthropology, what actually is anthropology? So, if you look at here, basically it is made up of two words. One is anthropo and other is logy. So, when talk about anthropo basically refers to humankind or mankind, simply we can say, and on the other hand logy refer to study. Actually it has come from the word logos basically means study, and more precisely we can say it refers to a systematic method of study of the subject as such. So if you try to understand, anthropology in simplest term can be defined as nothing but the systematic study of humans, systematic study of mankind himself, and that is what makes it very interesting. This is also what we can call as the USP of this particular subject, because as a human, as we all belong to human race, what can be more interesting than studying ourselves? And that is what actually anthropology does. And most interestingly, anthropology is also considered as a very comprehensive discipline. The term that we can use here is holistic as well. So it is very comprehensive, very holistic discipline in, and why we are calling it like this? It is because it does not only focus on studying and understanding one aspect of human being, it studies human being in entire totality. For example, it discusses and deals with the biological part of humans, our physical anatomy, our what you can call as how our mind works, how our brain works, and the entire anatomical structure as such. Upon studying the cultural and social aspect of human, and it is by studying this we can also become more tolerant, because when we are looking at different people from different regions of the world, we know there is a lot of differences. We all belong to the same species. As you know, we call ourselves Homo sapiens, if you try to understand here. So no matter which person, which human you are talking about on the entire earth, they belong to the same species, that is Homo sapiens. But still, if you look around us, there is a lot of diversity, and this diversity is reflected both in terms of biological or physical diversity, morphological diversity, as well as the socio-cultural diversity. For example, if you take example of a person staying in USA, and you take example a person who is staying in India, you take example a person who is staying in China, you will see there is a physical differences in the terms of eye color, hair color, in terms of the physical build, and apart from that also the type of society which they are a part of, the type of marriage system which they follow, the type of what you can call as the socio-cultural languages if we talk about, is quite different from each other. So how did these differences come into existence? How did these differences emerge even if we belong to the same species, is the subject matter of anthropology, and this is exactly what anthropology is trying to answer as such. In brief, we can say anthropology largely try to give you answer related to three aspects about humans. First of all, who are we? That is the first question that we ask ourselves, that as a human, who are we? Where do we belong to in the entire evolutionary if you talk about entire evolution that has happened on the planet Earth? We have so many animals, so many organisms existing, coexisting. Many animals and organisms have become extinct, for example dinosaurs, but still we exist today. So who are we? Second is, where do we come from, right? And third is, why the differences, as we have discussed, why we are so different from each other, even though if we belong to the same species, same group of people as such. In other way, anthropology can be equated with nothing but a type of four lens camera. While dealing with all these important questions, anthropology looks at the human being from what we can imagine or can present as an analogy with a 4-lens camera. 4-lens camera means the first lens focuses upon studying the physical characteristics of humans. When you talk about physical characteristics, what are we interested in? We are interested in understanding the build. Example, we know that people who are from African origin, who are living in Africa, who have been born in Africa, you will see that they are having tall limbs or longer limbs, for example. Similarly, people who are living in the polar areas, for example, you go in the Arctic tundra region, you have the Inuit tribe that resides there. There you will see they have a relatively shorter and stocky build. So why such kind of differences exist? Similarly, the differences you also see in terms of the color. For example, we have color of skin that changes. If you start from the northern pole, you start from the Arctic region and start coming toward the equatorial areas, what you see that as you move from north pole toward the equator, generally you will see a trend where the color of the skin of people becomes darker and darker as such. So what is the reason behind such kind of differences? Similarly, we can say the color of eye also varies from region to region. So all these physical characteristics, the differences in physical characteristic is studied in the physical anthropology, also called as biological anthropology, and that is what we can call as the first lens or the first lens of the anthropological camera. Apart from that, then the second lens focuses upon the socio-cultural, we can say the socio-cultural aspect of humans. For example, we as a human live in society, we are part of a society, and while being part of society, we also participate in various different cultural practices. These cultural practices can be as simple as worshipping of gods, religion we can equate it with. We can also understand one of the cultural practices we have is getting married, then we have starting of family, beginning of a family and all that. And while doing so, we continuously interact with different members of society, with different groups, social groups that we have in society. And also, if you look at different countries that you have across the world, the socio-cultural system of these regions are not same. They vary widely from one region to other region. For example, the rules of marriage in simple societies is quite different from the rules of marriage that we see in the modern society. The nature of family we see in the tribal society is very different from the nature of family we have in the modern society. For example, if we try to understand slightly in more detail, we can see that in the tribal society, marriage by capture is acceptable. Marriage by capture is something that is sanctioned by the society, that is accepted by the society. Now, what do we mean by the term marriage by capture? It simply means that it is allowed for a tribal male to capture any female from that particular tribe forcefully, and then they can be married, they can be accepted as a legal couple as such. While if you look at the modern society, such kind of marriages are akin to abduction, kidnapping, and if you try to do so, you will be simply put behind the bars, put in the prison as such. So we can understand it is the same socio-cultural practice of marriage, but the way of marrying is very different between these two societies as well. Similarly, you take example of other very important social institutions that you have family. Now, in the case of India, in majority of the rural India, if you go, majority of village you go, we follow a system that is called as, for example, patrilocal system. Now, what does patrilocal system states? That after marriage, it is the bride who has to move and she has to reside with the groom or groom's parents or groom's family, we can say. On the other hand, for example, if you go in the eastern part of India, in the northeast India, like you have states such as Meghalaya, there are certain tribes are there who are following exactly opposite system of residence. That means they follow what we call as matrilocal residence. So matrilocal residence means that after marriage, it is not the women, it is not the bride who has to leave her house, it is the groom who has to leave his house, and he has to stay with the family of bride as such. So we can see two different societies, two different types of institutions, two different types of socio-cultural system. So not only anthropology catalogs this system, not only anthropology tells us the kind of diverse system that exists, diverse institutions, diverse practices that exist all across the world, but anthropology also focuses upon explaining that what has led to development of such diverse features, institutions and cultural practices in different regions and different societies of the world. So that is why we are calling it very comprehensive, because it gives us not only question, but it also gives us answer to many of these questions. So that is the second lens of the anthropological camera. First, as we discussed, it is a physical characteristic, that is physical or a biological anthropology. Second is the socio-cultural anthropology. Now, third very important difference that you see, especially in the context of India, the diversity that we see is in the terms of languages. As we know that India is second most language diverse country in the world after Papua New Guinea. We have more than 700 languages that is spoken by variety of people, various different groups all across India that we have. So anthropology also try to understand that how did these languages come into existence. For example, we have so many languages: Hindi, English, Sanskrit, French, German. So anthropology tried to explain that do these languages share a common heritage? Did they come into existence from a single origin, common source, or languages have developed independent of each other in different parts of the world? And if there is similarity, what kind of similarity exists between the major languages of the world? If there is a dissimilarity, what kind of dissimilarity exists? What is the significance of language as far as the human being or human species is concerned? How significant is the language? Because as you know, it is through language we have been able to communicate with each other. It is through the use of language we have been able to transfer our ideas. We have been able to exchange ideas with our fellow human beings. And through this method, through this way, we have been able to coordinate, take action together. And that is how we have emerged as a most dominant force, most dominant species on the entire earth as such. So this is why understanding of languages, linguistic diversity is very important and critical if you want to understand humans. And the fourth lens of the camera can be equated with what we can call as the archaeological anthropology, which is again a very important part of anthropology. Because if you look at this subject, anthropology is not only the study of past, it is the study of past, present, as well as future. And especially when you're talking about the study of past without the archaeological evidences, without the archaeological expedition. And that is why archaeology makes a very important part or branch of anthropological studies. As you know, that archaeology largely deals with finding of fossil evidences. For example, these evidences can be in the terms of human skull or human any body parts that we might find from the older time. We can then evaluate that does this body part belong to the same species of which we are part of, like Homo sapiens, or is there certain differences and such. So on that basis, we can then understand that how we have evolved in last millions and millions of years, what kind of species, what kind of features those species had which existed before the coming of modern humans as such. And also archaeological evidences focus on cultural evidences as well. Cultural evidences can be tools. What kind of tools were used by the ancient humans? What kind of tools were used by, for example, the species that we have, Homo erectus, for example? What kind of pottery, what kind of dishes were used by them? What kind of what you can call as houses they used to live in? So all these understanding of past cannot be done without understanding archaeology, and that is why it makes up the fourth and most important lens of anthropological study as such. So now I think it should be clear when you talk about anthropology, it largely has having four branches: physical or biological, socio-cultural, linguistic, and archaeology. Now moving forward, if you look at how do anthropologists study the society, how do they study to understand humans in a better way? So there are various methods as we have discussed. We have study of tools, study of technology that were used by the early humans. Also at the same time, they focus on what we can call as participant observation method. That means if anthropologists want to know about a society, and how did humans lived before, one thing he has to do is he has to go and study the tribes, because tribes are considered as those humans whose lifestyle has not changed significantly since past as such, and that is why they are also called as simple societies. Their way of living is very similar to how humans has lived thousands and even hundreds of years ago. So in participant observation, what anthropologists do is they go and they live with particular tribal group for a long period of time, and on the basis of this living, on the basis of their daily interaction with the members of these tribal groups, then they try to explain that why such kind of socio-cultural practices exist in the tribe, how rationally we can explain it such. So studying of tools, technology, study of participant observation already have discussed. Also we focus on collecting and looking at the fossil evidences and all. So by doing so, we can have a much better understanding of the humans as such. Now, the question comes that not only from the perspective of UPSC optional, but also generally why anthropology is a very interesting subject and should be studied by people. So first question, obviously, first point, obviously, as you have discussed before, is because it is a very holistic branch, very holistic discipline, and I can tell you that no other subject deals with human in such a holistic, such a comprehensive manner as does the anthropology, because again it studies human in the chronological order, right from the past, in the present, and also talks about that what is going to be the future of our species, how might we adapt, how might we change, and these changes is not only from the perspective of physical changes and anatomical changes, but also it talks about the socio-cultural changes as such. Now, apart from that, also we have to understand that as far as the anthropology is concerned, it has a very wide scope, cutting across the dimensions of time and space as such. Plus, it is most comprehensive, as we discussed, of all the disciplines that study mankind, and it is because of this reason we can understand that anthropology has correlation with a lot of other subjects, a lot of other disciplines as such. For example, if I try to draw a particular pie chart here, so at the center sits your anthropology. Now, as I told you, because anthropology also focuses upon the study of society and culture of humans, anthropology has a very close relation with a subject that you have called as sociology. Since anthropology also deals with the human psyche, mankind, because anthropology, when you talk about the evolution of religion, we try to rationally explain that what might have propelled humans to come up with the idea of religion, what might have propelled and inspired mankind to come up with the idea and notion of God and such. So in that manner, we try to understand the psyche, and the study of human psyche again is done in psychology. So that is how anthropology also deals with the psychological aspect of humans and has a close relation with the psychology as such. As we discussed, one of the major lenses that you have in anthropology is archaeological lenses, and through archaeological lenses then we can try to study the history or the past of humans, and one such major part that you have is in prehistory. Prehistory refers to that part of human history which is not recorded, which is not written, it is in unwritten form. So prehistory again is having a correlation with which subject? The answer is history. So anthropology to a large extent also correlates, also encompasses many things that you have to study in history as well. So sociology, psychology, then you have prehistory, that is history, plus anthropology, as we have discussed, it is the study of humanity, not only in time, not only in the chronological order like past, present and future, but also it is a study of humanity in the space as well. And whenever we are talking about the spatial distribution, when we are talking about the spatial element, we can understand that this also is related to another branch that we have, that is geography as such. Plus, the most important thing that we have to understand here, that anthropologists do not just answer questions, they do not just present ideas, not just they present data and observations and all that. Rather, on the basis of all their comprehensive studies, on the basis of the observation, data, information that they have, they try to use this in a practical sense to help humanity, or to especially to help the tribal this we can say groups and all that. In this context, we can say that anthropology also deals to some extent with the public administration, as anthropologists play a key role in policy formulation, whether we're talking about largely the rural areas or whether we are talking about the tribal areas as such. So by looking at this pie chart, we can simply understand that it is such a holistic subject that it deals and discusses with all these different dimensions that we have, that also try to answer different aspects of humans as such. So that is what we mean when we talk about it is the most comprehensive, and it has a very, very wide scope cutting across the dimensions of time, space and all the other subjects that you have. Plus, also we have to understand that if you look at this anthropology, it has a good blend because it has a lot of theory. For example, you have 10 major theories as far as the UPSC prelims exam, UPSC optional examination is concerned. So these theories play a key role, and these are the basis on which other studies have been conducted. And at the same time, as I told you, that on the basis of data, observation and the theories that you have, you try to apply it to make the life of humans more better. That means it is theoretical as well as applied discipline in that sense. And most important thing, for example, it would seem that it can be a daunting task, a daunting challenge for you if you do not have any background in anthropology to deal with such a humongous, such a comprehensive subject. The answer is no, because this subject, though it seems that deals with so many aspects of humans, interesting thing is that it is so easier to understand that if you decide to take this as an optional, there is no such requirement of prior knowledge of the discipline. You do not need to have any prior understanding of anthropology. The only requirement that you have is because anthropology is the study of humanity itself. If you are human, you are fit to study anthropology. That is the only requirement as such. And that makes it very interesting. Now, the question that might come into your mind, that from this discussion, it seems that, okay, anthropology can be an interesting subject to study, but is it a good idea to take anthropology as an option? Because if you're taking any subject as an optional, your main goal, your main objective, even if it is short term, is to clear the UPSC examination, if possible, with good rank. So you get the desired rank and you get the desired services after clearing examination. So there also anthropology can be very advantageous for the aspirants, because if you compare the syllabus of anthropology with other popular optionals that you have, anthropology wins here because it has very short and crisp syllabus. As you know that all the optional papers are divided into two papers largely. You have paper 1 and you have paper 2. So if you talk about this particular subject, in paper 1 you have largely 12 units. 12 units are there, and similarly in paper 2 you have 9 units. So total 21 chapters or 21 units we can say is what we have to study in anthropology, and this is relatively very less as compared to other popular optional subject. Plus the advantages, that means, because if you try to understand, as it has very short and crisp syllabus, what is advantage that you have as an aspirant? That means you will be able to complete this optional in relatively less time. And that is why especially those aspirants who are trying to appear in mains examination, who will be appearing in mains examination for the first time, they have obviously time crunch. They might not have any background in the optional, because earlier they might have just focused on clearing prelims examination and all. So for them it is very good, because in a time span of 2 to 3 months, if you stretch it maximum to 4 months, you will be able to complete this entire subject. Not only will you be able to complete it, but rather you will have enough time to write several answers, good number of answers, and at the same time do 2-3 divisions as well. And believe me, that is what is required if you want to score good here. So it has very high scoring potential. And if you look at the records, previous records, you can see that it is, if you have put in effort, if you have put in what you can call as required effort in this particular subject, easily you can get between 280 to 300 marks. And on the basis of how engaged you are with the subject, it is quite possible you can get marks in the range of 320, 330 as well. And that is a very, very good marks, excellent marks I can say, as far as the optional subjects and the examination is concerned. Now also, while you are studying anthropology, other advantage you have is that it is overlapping with several other subjects that you have in the general studies paper, that is spanning across general studies 1, 2, and to some extent even 4 we can say, where we have to study about ethics as such. And the example I can give you, when you talk about general studies paper 1, as I told you, in anthropology we deals with archaeology, and one of the major aspect of archaeology, one of the major part of archaeology you have to study about is prehistory. And in general studies paper 1 you have to study about history, and prehistory is very critical part there. For example, you might have read about Harappa civilization, that is the Indus Valley civilization and all that. So in anthropology you have to discuss and study in detail about the Harappa Valley civilization, or also called as Indus Valley civilization. You have to study about all the ages that we had before, whether it is the Bronze Age, before that you have Iron Age, then you have Paleolithic, Mesolithic, then you have Neolithic, right? So all these ages and entire prehistory you have to understand comprehensively, and it is so comprehensive that it will deal with a large part of your history syllabus as well. Apart from that, in GS paper 1, you also have to study about human society. And as I told you, in anthropology, one of the major lenses of anthropology is what? Studying the socio-cultural aspect of human. So to large extent, our society or Indian society will also be covered in anthropology. So you can understand you have 3 subjects in GS paper 1, history, geography and society. So large part of history and society is having overlap with the anthropology as such, and the information that you will have while studying anthropology can easily be used as an example or even as a main content in many of the main questions asked from this particular topic. Similarly, in GS paper 2, you have to study about the administration, you have to study about the tribals, you have to study about the problems of tribe, you have to study about the constitutional safeguards that is granted by India's constitution or tribal people and all that. This also makes up a very important part of anthropological studies. So there also we can understand that we have overlap. In GS paper 3, then again we have to discuss about the economy and all that. So one of the branches of socio-cultural anthropology is especially focused upon economic anthropology. So to large extent there is overlap between the economic anthropology and many core concepts we have to study in GS3 economy as well, and GS4 ethics, because one of the objective of the study of anthropology, from the study of anthropology as a human you have, is to become a better human being. And when I say better human being, what exactly do I mean? I mean that you need to be more tolerant, you need to be more what I can call as a person with cultural relativistic attitude. If you try to understand this in the anthropological term, today most of the society, most of people that we have around us, you will see that the major reason behind any disputes, any violence comes from the ethnocentric behavior. Now these are very, very important terms we have to understand here. Ethnocentrism or ethnocentric behavior refer to such behavior where a person or a group believes that whatever their thinking is, whatever their cultural practices is, whatever their tradition is, that is very important and that is the only way how people should live. On the other hand, people having cultural relativistic outlook, they understand that every society, every culture has their own way of living and none of these way of living is inferior or superior to each other. Each of the way of living, the cultural tradition, practices have developed due to certain factors, and this can only be understood if you look at from within that particular culture as such. So if you have cultural relativistic outlook, that is what anthropology promotes, obviously you will be more tolerant in nature, you will not be inward looking, you will be outward looking, you will be more tolerant, you will be outward looking, and you will have a great deal of respect for every human being, no matter which background, which geographical region, which what you can call as political parties do they belong to. So that is what we have to understand here, and that is also is a major part of your GS paper 4, that is ethics as such. Plus apart from that, as you have a comprehensive and complete understanding of humans, you have a comprehensive understanding of human society, anthropology also can help you in formulating good points, valid points as far as the essay is concerned, because a lot of topics of essay is coming from, for example, feminism when you talk about. So in anthropology you have to specifically discuss and deal about the feminist movement. What do we understand by the term feminism? We have many essays coming from the effect of industrialization, urbanization. So all these phenomena, because all of these are nothing but socio-cultural phenomena, these are economic phenomena, so you have to discuss them in more detail in anthropology, and thus lot of points you can formulate, lot of points you can write in the essay paper as well. Plus also, because as I told you that you do not have any prior requirement of studying this subject, having background in this particular subject, but also many times aspirants have a doubt that if they have not studied a single book of anthropology till now, can in 3, 4, 5 months they can have enough number of resources, enough number of books and notes through which they can prepare for the subject? The answer is yes. There is sufficient amount or sufficient number of good resources that is very relevant for the UPSC examination, and by doing a comprehensive study and for some resources by doing the selective study, you can be sure that your preparation will be at par with the people who have been studying this subject for several years as well. So that is the first point. Now, other advantages, if we try to highlight it, what are the advantages students or aspirants can have? So as I told you, there is no requirement of graduation in anthropology. When you start your preparation, after you do one study, after you do 2-3 divisions, you will be at par with all the people who might have studied anthropology for 1, 2, 3 years as well, because the concepts here that you have are very easy to understand. So if you read them 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, you will understand them properly, and then this can be useful in formulating good answers also. Plus, the other advantage you have, especially if you look at the paper 1 of anthropology, you do not have to link with a lot of current affairs. So if you are studying anthropology, you have to have a limited understanding and limited study of current affairs, because linkage is relatively less. And also this is not something that is theoretical in nature that we are talking about the advantage. This has been reflected in the preferences of the toppers of previous year. We talk about UPSC and all that, where we have seen large number of people who have got top ranks. they have selected and they have passed by using anthropology in optional. Plus, one thing that we have to understand here is that when you are doing the answer writing practice that we'll discuss in later part of video, one thing you have to focus from beginning is to make diagram as such, because diagram rich presentation will generally fetch you higher marks as far as this examination, as far as this particular option is concerned. Now, as we discussed, again to briefly revise, you have a good overlap between anthropology and general studies. You have a very good potential to score high marks in this particular subject, and the success rate also speaks for itself. And that is why if you look at in last few years, if you go back to year 2013, 14, 15, only few hundred people used to select anthropology as an optional UPSC examination. But if you come to year 23, 24, we have seen thousands of people, thousands of aspirants selecting anthropology because of the advantages that it offers. Plus, as I told you, that even suppose if you have a degree holder, let's suppose someone has a degree in anthropology, example Masters of Arts, MA degree, it does not mean that they will have a lot of advantage over you, they will have upper hand against you. Rather, the topic and the syllabus of anthropology is such that it creates a level playing field for all the aspirants, whether it is first timer, second timer, or even having a background as such. And most importantly, it requires very little time to master as compared to any other optional subjects, and study material is comprehensively available. So this is to summarize that a good choice, why anthropology can be a good choice for you if you are trying to look for a UPSC optional as such. Now the question comes that if you decide to start preparation, where should we start our preparation from? So first thing that we know is that in anthropology or in any optional for that matter, if you try to again understand it better, in UPSC you have two types of paper. One is the optional paper and other is the general studies paper. So when we talk about general studies paper, in these papers you have to have a broad understanding of the topics of the topics that are mentioned in the syllabus. So you're not trying to go in depth of the topics here. On the optional, on the other hand, you have to have in-depth understanding. Then only you will be able to formulate good answer. Your content will be rich as such. So that is why the first requirement for any option in UPSC is that you need to fall in love with this particular subject as such. And only if you are falling in love with the subject, you will be able to go and do in-depth study. You will able to develop and inculcate interest in the subject, and also you will be able to write and formulate good answers. And thus the first part of your preparation or the first part of your journey should be in inculcating interest in this particular subject. And that is why the book that you can start with is a well-known book all across the world. It's a very, very popular book, we can say, called as Sapiens, written by Yuval Noah Harari, an Israeli author. And Sapiens is summary of what we can call of the evolutionary studies that we have to do in the anthropology. When you talk about the fossil evidences, that is very important part of the first paper in the anthropology. This entire fossil evidence, to some extent in a interesting manner, in a summary wise manner, has been covered in this particular book, and that is how we can see the description here also. That is a brief history of humankind as such. So this is, I believe, you can start your preparation with. Then obviously, if the time permits, you can take a look at a book called as Guns, Germs and Steel. This is a book that largely deals with the historical aspect, because when we talk about the anthropology, I told you it is also the study of past, human past, and that is where this book can play a very important role, written by Jared Diamond. And the human society, a large part of socio-cultural anthropology, the book also comes in handy, because when you talk about anthropology, a lot of case studies and examples can be added in the answer, and these case studies and examples can be found in this particular book as well. And then, as we have discussed, that one of the most scoring area that you have in anthropology, because in this particular area you have the possibility of drawing diagram, you have the possibility of drawing a map here, and that is why archaeological anthropology, if you talk about, can be a very important part, can play a very important part in increasing your score. And if you want to know more detail, if you want to have a visual understanding of the archaeological anthropology, then you have a very good this what you can call as documentary released by National Geographic Channel called as the Human Family Tree. Because when we talk about the human family tree, we have to understand that we have evolved right down. If you go back Okay, millions and millions of years in the past, we have evolved from the ape. So from ape, you have the bifurcation into the Homo lines, and then you have the other lines. So in the Homo lines also, we have, for example, Homo erectus. You talk about Homo habilis, you have, then you have the other species that has come. So all these evolution is very clearly shown in this particular geography. So visual understanding can play a very important role in not only inculcating your interest, but also to give you idea that how we have come, where we have come on the evolutionary journey as such. Apart from that, if we talk about strictly from the perspective of UPSC, right? From that perspective, if you have to look at the syllabus of the anthropology given in the UPSC this notification, so the best place to start with is a very good book, very interesting book again, called as Anthropology, written by Ember and Ember. You can see from here author, and again you have to do here selective reading. You do not have to read this entire book page by page. You have to do the selective reading. Now, the question might be coming into your mind that what do we mean by the term selective reading? Selective reading here means that this book is not written for the people who are largely preparing for the UPSC optional. This book is written for the people who want to build their career in anthropology, who want to have degrees in anthropology like bachelor's, master's, and even PhD and all that. So that is why when we are reading this book, at the same time, you need to have UPSC syllabus along with yourself. So take a look at the keywords, the topics that are mentioned in the UPSC, that is mentioned in the UPSC syllabus, and on the basis of that keywords and topics, then you can understand that which topics or which chapters of this book is relevant to you and which book, which chapter is not relevant. So I think about 50 to 60% of this book is very relevant from UPSC perspective. And again, as far as the socio-cultural anthropology is concerned, you can add a lot of case studies, a lot of examples from all across the world, and that will give you an edge when you are writing answer as such. Now the question is that if you look at the UPSC syllabus as published in the notification, what actually UPSC syllabus is. So as we have discussed, all of the optional paper including anthropology is divided into two papers. We have paper 1 and paper 2. Paper 1 generally focuses upon developing a conceptual understanding of the subject matter. So for example, the first unit of the paper largely explains the reader about what actually is anthropology, what anthropology try to does as a discipline in the branch of sciences that we have, branch of humanities that we have. And thus here you have to largely focus on three aspects. What is the meaning of anthropology? To some extent we have addressed that in the early part of video. What is the scope of anthropology? That means what actually anthropology try to answer, and there also we have made a holistic diagram to explain that it has four lenses that are much more comprehensive in nature, and also how anthropology has developed as a separate discipline. Because if you go back in the history, large part of anthropology was overlapping with sociology, so it was basically a sub-branch, sub-part of sociology, and since then we have seen evolution of this subject as a separate discipline. So how it has developed to that extent, plus how it is related to the other disciplines, as we already have discussed, there are a lot of overlaps. So these are what we have to understand in the first unit, which is also very interesting and very important unit from the UPSC perspective as such. Then the second part of the paper 1 deals with the socio-cultural part of human, that deals with nature of culture and society. We have to look at the important, very important, and to some extent we can say universal cultural practices. For example, marriage is something that you see in almost all the societies that you have across the world. The family is something that is making up the smallest unit of society. Again, it is common, universal in nature. Kinship, when we talk about kinship, is nothing but a relationship between different individuals of a society, either by blood or by marriage ties, affinal linkages we can say. Plus also it deals with the economic and political organizations that you have in the society. For example, this political organization, the study of economic organization here in anthropology is not pertaining to any one particular society, rather it deals with right from the tribal society, simple society, like band organization, for example, in tribal society, who are having a group of only 10 to 15 people. So as simple as that, what kind of economic and political organization do they follow? To the modern state, which is much more complex in nature, and that is where we have millions and millions of people who are members of such kind of organization and such. For example, when we talk about India as a state, what kind of political organizations we follow or see in India, what kind of economic policies, economic organization do we see in India. So everything is dealt in detail here. Plus also it deals with the religion, language and ethnicity part of the humanity as such. So now question comes that as far as the socio-cultural anthropology is concerned, what can be the books that has to be followed to get good marks? So obviously first is the book that is Dr. Vivek Bhasme. This book can play a very important role in ensuring good answer writing as such. Second, as we have discussed, Ember and Ember, this should be a base book. If you read this book as per the UPSC syllabus, I'm sure you will be able to develop a good understanding, a comprehensive understanding, and that also is very important because one of the problems that a student faces, especially those who are studying anthropology for the first time, that many times the terms, the topics that you have in this book seems very complex nature, and that is where the roles of class come into picture, because in the class our effort will be to ensure that whatever concepts you have can be explained to you in a very simple manner, lucid manner. That means even if you have not studied this subject before, you should be able to understand this in first time itself. So that is where if you are attending classes, it can be a very important, it can play a very important role in your preparation journey as such. Third book is again largely related to socio-cultural anthropology, written by D.N. Mazumdar and T.N. Madan. So if you are done with these three books, I am sure that majority of your socio-cultural anthropology you will be able to understand along with the class notes and all that, and nothing else is required in this particular part. Then the third part of paper 1, I told you, deals with the biological anthropology, that is a physical anthropology, where you need to have understanding about these components largely. For example, it deals with the genetics and human evolution part of the entire human race. It deals with the human variation, as we have discussed, that humans all across the world varies in the morphological characteristic, whether it is skin color, whether it is the hair color, whether it is the eye color, in the terms of build, the length of the limbs and all that. Similarly, at the same time, we know that humans, or more precisely, now we know Homo sapiens sapiens is a member of a group called as primates. So who are primates? When we can classify any animal as primate, and why man is considered a primate? That is the main question this particular branch or this particular topic of the anthropology try to answer. Plus, as we discuss, human evaluation is dealt in detail as well, how we have evolved from generation to generation, how we have evolved from species to species. And the last part, which again is very interesting part, is the applied anthropology. Now applied anthropology is nothing but the concepts, for example, that you have learned in the anthropology, those concepts you apply in various different fields. For example, by understanding human anatomy, we can apply this concept to understand that which person is suitable for which sport, or which sport suits best to a particular person, so that his and her chances of success in such a sports can be maximized. For example, it also is applied in terms of nutrition. What kind of nutrition is required for good development and growth of human body and mind as such, and what kind of deficiency of nutrition deficiency can cause which kind of diseases, and how we can minimize such chances and such, and so and so and so. For example, even in the defense, when you are designing, for example, fighter jet aircraft, you need to have a cockpit in which pilot can sit. Now we know that pilots who are selected are of various different heights, various different, we can say, body build and all that. So you need to have a proper design that can accommodate all the fighters, or the what you can call as personals, military personals who are selected in Air Force. So that is also where anthropology comes into picture. As I told you, it is the study of the human physical anatomy, human physical characteristic. Now, as far as the physical anthropology part is concerned, the most important book that you have to follow here is Physical Anthropology, written by P. Nath. But again, if you look here, actually this book is written not from the perspective of UPSC examination, but from the perspective of having a degree in anthropology. So again, when you are talking about reading this book for the physical or biological anthropology part, again keep in mind what you have to do is the selective study as such. That means again same thing you will do, you will take UPSC anthropology syllabus with yourself, and you will see that which of the chapters that are given in this particular book is matching with the syllabus, and only those chapters are what you have to focus upon. So we can say that almost 80% of this book is relevant for UPSC syllabus. 20% is something that you can skip, that is very much in detail, not required for the UPSC as such. That is about the paper 1, that is physical anthropology. Similarly, if you decode paper 2, now paper 2 is very interesting, very important, because if you look at the general scores given by UPSC, most of people get their highest mark in the paper 2, and paper 2 also has a lot of overlap with general studies paper that you have. For example, most part of paper 2 deals with the tribal studies, and that is also common to your general studies. But if you try to understand it systematically, first part of paper 2 is what we can call is archaeological anthropology as such. Now we'll talk about archaeological anthropology. I told you prehistoric archaeology is very, very important here, and it deals with all the civilizations that we have. Harappan civilization, for example, in case of India, and not only in India, here the prehistory archaeology to some extent also try to correlate the ancient civilization, older civilizations that have developed in other part of the world as well. For example, we have discussed about the Mesopotamian civilization, we have studied about the Egyptian civilization, so how they are linked with each other. Similarly, Indian archaeology, we have what are the fossil finds that we have seen or we have found in India as such, whether in terms of the cultural practices, whether in terms of the human fossils and all that. Second part deals with the Indian anthropology that largely focuses upon two communities that we have in India. These are tribal community and rural community. And here also we focus on ethnographic profile of India, the kind of social changes and contemporary issues that we are seeing in the Indian society. For example, when we talk about Indian society, we can say one of the major component that we have here is caste system. So how did caste system come into existence? How did caste system changed in the past 100, 200, 300 years? What is the current situation of caste system? That means to what extent it is even relevant in today's Indian society? How is it related to the political system that we have in India? How is it related to the economic system that we have in India? What kind of government policy we have seen being formulated in India, especially after independence, to tackle the problems, issues, challenges that we have due to the caste system and all that. For example, when we talk about caste system, one thing that comes into picture is of untouchability. So as you know that after independence of India, Constitution has basically ensured that untouchability becomes a crime. It is prohibited, it is illegalized as such. So all these kind of changes that we see in the society, plus the contemporary issue, you talk about how Indian society is continuously adapting to the change, how it is modifying, how it is changing its cultural practices and all that. That also is the subject matter of this particular chapter as such. For example, here we have to study how globalization has influenced the Indian society. Here we have to study how media, the evolution of media itself. For example, you know that few years back we only have traditional media such as radio, TV, newspapers and all that. Today, we have a social media where everyone is nothing but a journalist as such. So how the evolution of social media has created a sea change and has caused a sea change in the society. How because of its influence our socio-cultural practices are changing. How because of the influence of the globalization, again, industrialization, feminization, how our social structure is changing, how our social institutions are being shaped. Because you know that the marriage rules, we talk about the traditional marriage practices, we talk about the traditional family structures, everything has underwent a transformation. So all these we have to study in anthropology as well. And here again, all the understanding that we will have by studying this entire topics can be applied to ensure a better life for people, citizens of India, especially people who are part of tribal India and rural India as such. And that is where the action or applied anthropology comes into picture. Now the question is that what should be the basic book to study Indian anthropology? So first is an outline of Indian prehistory. Prehistory, as you discussed, largely deals with the civilization up to what you can call as Indus Valley civilization, that is last one. So their Indian prehistory by D.K. Bhattacharya, as you can see from here, is a very good book, very important book, and also everything is explained here in a lucid and interesting manner, so that you will not have to put a lot of efforts to understand and to have understanding of this concept here. Second book is again related to the Indian society, dealing with the caste system, dealing with the traditional practices, agricultural system and all that. That is Indian Anthropology by Nadeem Hasnan. And tribal India, that makes up roughly what we can call as 50 to 60% of your syllabus. That is from here also. A lot of questions are being asked. This also can be dealt in a comprehensive manner by the book written by the same author, Nadeem Hasnan. The book is called as Tribal India as such. So that is how we can understand the preparation for the this part of paper 2 can be done as well. Now the question comes that what we can do more to ensure that our answers are quite unique in the examination, to ensure that we are able to get even half and 1 mark more as compared to other aspirants in examination, so that collectively we can get sufficiently high mark that we can get selected in the UPSC, can get our name in the merit list as such. So there are certain things that you can do to add value to your notebooks, to your notes, and to your exam, to your answers. And that is, I told you that around 11-12 major theories we have to study that makes the core of your anthropology. To some extent, we can say that without having a clear understanding of the anthropological theories, you would not be able to write and formulate a good answer in anthropology. So apart from referring to the class notes, apart from the referring to standard books for this particular topic, you can also refer to the website of University of Alabama, where you can find a write-up about all of these theories, and a lot of things, interesting things are mentioned in those write-up which can be used for writing good answer. Anthropological Survey of India, they keep on releasing new reports, they keep on releasing new data, information, all that. This can be used because in the paper 2 specifically, you have to have certain linkage with the current affairs. So these fresh data, new data, latest data and reports can be used by looking at the website of ASI. Ministry of Tribal Affairs, as you know, every year it comes up with a report. Plus, government continuously is making up and coming up with new policies, new programs, new schemes as far as the tribal India is concerned, as far as the agricultural India is concerned, as far as the rural India is concerned. So all these recent schemes, programs you can get from the Ministry of Tribal Affairs website or also from the Ministry of Rural Development website. Government schemes and tribal related news reported in newspapers is something that you can also use to substantiate your answer, especially in paper 2. Plus, in paper 2, one of the major topics we have to understand and study about is the problems that the tribal society, people belonging to tribal community, face in their daily life. This problem can be in the form of land alienation. This problem can be in the form of indebtedness. This problem can be in the form of what we can call as a lack of employment opportunities, poverty to some extent we can say. So what are the problems that the tribal society in India faces? What is the reason that such problems, such issues exist in this society, and what can we do both from the perspective of government as well as from the perspective of anthropologists to ensure that such problems can be minimized and even can be eradicated? So these are mentioned in a very important report. Actually, I can say one of the most important report that you have to definitely follow for anthropology, that is the Kaka Committee report. And last, in the year January 2014, you have Yojana magazine, as you know, is published. So you have tribal and marginalized community based magazine. This was edition based on this particular topic. So a lot of value added addition you can do from this particular this booklet as well. So these are some of the material you can use to add value in your notes as well as answer. Now the question comes that what should be the general approach to study this particular subject? So again, as I told you, that though anthropology had an advantage as it has short and crisp syllabus, right? It has short and crisp syllabus that I have explained to you in the beginning of the video. And because of this short and crisp syllabus, it can be completed in a shorter period of time. But that is where students do the mistake, because they then focus on completing subject as fast as possible, so that will have a kind of comfort that yes, I have completed or I have been done with anthropology. But that is not a good approach. What rather you should do is to focus on conceptual clarity rather than ensuring that you complete syllabus in 1 month or 2 months. Rather than giving you this kind of timeline, you should give the timeline that I will ensure that while I am doing first revision or while I am studying even for the first time, I will understand or try to understand all the concepts, all the definitions properly, and then only I will move forward. Second, in anthropology, and specifically if I say you in the socio-cultural anthropology, there are a lot of definitions, lot of terms that you might find new, very new, that you might have not heard before. So you have to have proper understanding of this definition and terms from the perspective of anthropology. Now this is very important because, as I told you, one topic we have to study in socio-cultural anthropology is marriage. Now all of us are part of the society where marriage is a very common practice. To some extent it is a universal practice, we can say. So everyone has have some idea that what is a marriage. That means if I ask anyone who has never read anthropology that explain what is marriage in simple terms, he would be able to do so. But this answer, this definition, we cannot write in answer of UPSC mains examination. When we are asked to define, explain marriage, we have to define this from the perspective of anthropologists who have studied and who have defined marriage as such. For example, in case of marriage, the most comprehensive definition in anthropology that you will find was given by a noted anthropologist called as Kathleen Go. So what exactly Kathleen Gore has stated? You have to write verbatim. That means exactly same definition. You cannot interpret it by your own mind. You cannot twist and change the words and terms that is given in the definition. So that is very important. That means here comes the role of memorization. For major definitions, major facts, major terms that you have in anthropology, ensure that how it has been explained by these anthropologists, write them verbatim as such. Plus, as we have discussed already, study anthro theory really well, understand them in detail, and I told you there are 11 to 12 theory. So for every theory, you can allocate 2 to 3 days. So within a month, what will happen? Along with other topics, you will be able to do with all, you will be able to finish all the theories as such, and that will give you a much more comprehensive idea, and you will be able to relate and interlink different topics of the subject as such. Plus, as I told you, we have tried to interlink topics and contributions of anthropologists from different areas, and this interlinking has to be done both in the paper 1 along with the paper 2 as such. As far as the note making is concerned, rather than just writing whatever is given in the notebook or whatever is given in the study material or books for that matter, your note should be very rich. That is what you should be aiming for. It should be comprehensive in nature, and it should have 2 major components apart from the text. For example, definitions, concepts that you have learned, you also have to focus on drawing adequate number of diagrams and including adequate number of case studies, examples from different part of world as such. For example, we talk about marriage. In marriage, you have to study about, let us say, types of marriage. So in types of marriage, what you have to do? Suppose we have in tribal society 8 different types of marriage. So for each of these 8 different types, include examples. In which tribe you will see which type of marriage, right? Which form of marriage. Also, rather than looking at 5, 6, 7 different study materials, 10 study materials from 10 different coaching institutions or 10 different publications, rather students should focus on any 1 or 2 maximum reference book for every particular what you can call as topic, for every particular units. I have told you what should be the reference book, and most importantly in the classes, when we conduct anthropology classes, you will be provided with the comprehensive class notes. So this should be your base. Now you do not have to change your base. This should be the most comprehensive base, and within that, from various different sources like newspapers, magazines, you have the tribal affair website, you have to just keep on adding nugget point, you have to keep on adding a small facts, data as an example such. Nothing else is required here. First, make notes from it and then add relevant content from the other books and study material, so that when you are revising, you will not have 5, 6 different booklets and 5, 6 different notebooks that you have to look through before 1 month or 1 week before the examination. You should have a single source, and that source itself should act as a source of revision. That source should itself be sufficient to ensure that you are able to properly revise every topic that is given in the UPSC syllabus as such. Now here comes a very interesting part, that when you're writing answer, for example, or you're even making notes, make sure that for about 10 to 12, or let us say you have 15 important anthropologists who has made a stellar contribution in the field of anthropology. So ensure that you have a relevant name of these anthropologists, what are the publication year in which they have published important books, and what is the name of the tribes on which they have carried out a study as such. And obviously you can take help of internet here as well to enrich your answer as such. Now, if you look at the trend of anthropology optional paper, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, in the last, we can say since at least 2015, since when anthropology has emerged as a popular choice, one thing that we see, out of all the topics that you have in this particular subject, evolution and genetics is the one that has been given consistent weightage, by the UPSC question framers. So every year, adequate number or good number of topics, questions actually from evolution and genetics we can see, and that is how we can understand that as far as the biological anthropology is concerned, this is a very important topic. So make sure that you properly cover it, make sure that you have practiced all the PYQs, because later on we will discuss that questions are continuously being repeated in anthropology. And it's not only that the concepts are repeated, the exact same questions are repeated year after year from many important topics such as evolution and genetics. Second, as far as the socio-cultural topics are concerned, you have to have understanding, because now questions are being asked which are more analytical in nature. So, though you know about the marriage, definition of marriage, though you know about the definition of family, you know the definition of kinship, how these definitions, how these concepts, how these understanding fit in our modern society, how our modern society is changing, and how these definitions itself are subject to change. So, from that perspective, you have to analyze all the topics and then you have to frame answers here. Physical anthropology is where if your conceptual clarity is something that is achieved, that means you have been able to clearly understand all the concepts, all the terms here, nothing more is required. Largely questions are of what you can call as static based questions, and simply it is asking, or UPSC is largely trying to estimate that to what extent you have been able to understand the concepts here. Diagrams are something that you have to frequently use both in the physical anthropology. For example, especially we talk about fossil evidences. You cannot expect to write a good answer without drawing the fossil. Because, for example, if question is asked about Homo erectus, a question is asked about Neanderthals, you cannot expect to write a good answer because without drawing what you can call as the skull diagram of these particular species such. So diagrams play a very critical role, and also overall what we can understand that questions are neither very easy nor very difficult. Most of questions can be considered as of moderate difficulty nature. So with good effort, you should be able to write proper answers. Now apart from that, if you look at the paper 2, which largely I told you deals with the Indian anthropology and the tribal anthropology, what we see is that the focus of UPSC is more on the current events. So what are the major challenges that tribes of India are facing? What are the constitutional safeguard that tribes of India has been given? What are the what you can call as social welfare programs? What are the what you can call as reservation policy benefits? Why and how it is given to the tribes and such? So based on that, the questions are asked, and questions are of such nature that if you are just looking at the question itself, you might get confused that whether it is anthropology questions or whether it is the general studies paper 2 questions. So that kind of generalist questions are being asked here. But again, keep in mind, while writing answers in anthropology, we have to be more detailed in manner. You have to write an answer from the anthropologist perspective as such. Questions again is based on policy as well as static blend. Case study is very important part. Again, I am emphasizing it that as far as paper 2 is concerned, right from the start, when you start preparing for the UPSC anthropology, and when you are entering and you are reading the topics of paper 2, make sure that collect as many examples and case studies from newspapers and magazines as possible. Integration with contemporary schemes is required, and as I told you that UPSC is asking more of analytical question these days as compared to simple static based questions. Now, what are the major challenges and what you can also call as the problems that UPSC, or mistakes we can say UPSC aspirant do while preparing for UPSC optional such as anthropology, is again they over focus on theory and they just focus on remembering, writing, understanding theory again and again. But as I told you, the problem these days, questions these days being asked is of analytical nature. So the application of this theory also is something that you have to practice, and that is where writing answer becomes very important. More answers you write, more model questions you solve, more test series you attempt in anthropology, better is the chances of success, because then you will be able to write a better answer in examination as well. Many times students neglect diagram making. They think that first they should go through and read all the concepts, they should go through and understand all the concepts here, they memorize all the important facts, definitions and all that. Diagram is something that will do in the end stage of preparation, but that never occurs basically. And as I told you that in many areas, for example in archaeology, in fossil evidences, in primatology, for example in Indian anthropology also to some extent, diagram making becomes key. So that is something you should focus on right from the beginning of the preparation as well. Plus lack of case study integration, something I told you. Ignoring PYQ is the deadliest mistake you can do in UPSC, and more specifically in UPSC anthropology, because questions are continuously being repeated. I will later give you example also that how, if you look at last 5 years from the same topic, what kind of questions are being asked. That means if you are done with last 10 to 15 years, let us say, of question paper, I can assure you that 30 to 40% of the questions that will be asked in examination will be from those topic itself. So you will not have to think a lot that what and how to formulate the answer. You will already have written those answers many times. So you will simply again regenerate those answers from your mind on the answer sheet, and you will not have to put a lot of effort, and the extra time that you have, then that you can utilize in some answers which are of unique in nature as such. So do not ignore PYQ. This is the deadliest mistake. After completing of syllabus, topic wise, chapter wise, you should go through all the PYQs. At least if you are not able to attempt all the questions, at least prepare a model answer, model structure for the answers here, and do not delay starting answer writing practices. Now, when you talk about the answer writing, one thing that we have to do is to focus on examples and illustrating with the diagram as such. For example, I told you about a topic that we have in paper 2, that is tribal studies. And tribal studies, we have to understand about something that is called as NMS complex. Now, NMS complex is clearly given here, that is nature, man, spirit complex. So, if suppose in UPSC Anthropology, they keep asking questions like that, they will not give detail about the question, they will simply write nature, man, spirit complex, 5-mark question or 10-mark question. So, in that case, you can explain everything, what you know about it. But if you are not drawing this schematic diagram that actually explain the relation between all these three components, how man is related to nature, how nature is dependent on man, how spiritual world and the human world, that is dead world and alive world, are interconnected as far as the tribals are concerned, how influence of man is seen on the spiritual world and how influence of spiritual world is seen on man, and how nature, spirit nature are also linked. So no matter how you try to explain this by writing, it would never be enough unless and until you draw this kind of schematic diagram as such. So this is why I have told you that such kind of practices are required if you want to write really good answer in anthropology. Similarly, we have to study about this practice that is followed in the Pacific Oceans. You have several tribes, for example, Trobriand Islanders they are called as. So you have Kula system. So again, UPSC can simply ask a question, that is Kula exchange, 10-mark question. So in those cases, you cannot explain this just by writing. No matter how detailed you write, you have to necessarily show that what is Kula exchange, how necklaces are there, how armbands are there, they are being exchanged by different members of the tribe, by different groups of tribe, and these tribes are residing in different islands as such, and how they help in ensuring social solidarity in the context of tribal unity. As far as the fossils are concerned, you have to ensure that you properly address phylogenetic status of the fossils. You have to ensure that, for example, if you talk about Homo sapiens, which are the species that came before Homo sapiens? What is the relation between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens? What kind of changes we have seen, modification we have seen, for example, in human skull between Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, and all such. So characteristic is something that you have to focus upon, physical characteristic, cultural characteristic, time span of the fossils and all that. Plus, geographical distribution of fossils are also required. For example, you would show that where in Africa did you find fossils related to Homo erectus, where in Indonesia you find fossils related to Homo erectus, where in China you found fossils related to Homo erectus, and same in India as such. So these are the major components of fossil study. Now, as far as the paper 1 is concerned, 3-4 things more we can understand. That you have to focus first on a static questions with scope of diagrams and example. You have to have a scholarly approach to write answer, and this you cannot develop in few days. This we have to integrate right from the beginning of the preparation itself. Example, Kula ring example I told you, you have to write that who is the anthropologist who has carried out the study here, what is the name of books or the publication where he has mentioned about this particular practice. Even if you write the year in which this book is published, that can also be a very important part of your answer. And then also you explain this in proper manner. So this you will develop gradually as you complete the syllabus, as you study different part of the syllabus as such. Similarly, when we talk about prehistory, as you can see that there are a lot of tools that we have found by archaeological evidences, archaeological gatherings. So these also you have to ensure that you make diagrams of these tools rather than just writing their names as such. As far as the paper 2 is concerned, as it is more dynamic in nature, we can understand that you have to interlink it properly with the current affairs. You have to interlink properly with the modern this challenges that we are facing in society. For example, ethnic conflicts that we have. So you cannot just discuss about caste-based conflict, ethnic conflict without giving proper example. And examples you have to give it from the recent time. For example, when you talk about the ethnic conflict or ethnic violence, you can give example in the United States of America. We have seen in the last few years, we have increased cases of ethnic conflicts. We have seen increased cases of ethnic conflict in African countries, for example. So why and how? These all you have to also address in the answer as such. Plus, most important, the concepts that you have learned in paper 1, you have to link it, integrate it with the dynamic part of paper 2 as such. Now, what we can say in conclusion, again, if you try to summarize is that by and large, anthropology remains a static subject. Though I told you here and there, they are asking analytical question. Here and there, they are asking dynamic question that is based on current affairs. But those questions can also be easily answered if you have properly studied general studies and the syllabus of general studies, and you have a good understanding of the core part, the static part of syllabus. Plus, previous year question practice is the most important strategy you can adopt as far as the anthropology paper is concerned, because as I told you, topics, questions often get repeated. So you need to have a good command over PYQs and you have to practice them thoroughly, especially for the topics mentioned in the UPSC syllabus. And let us try to understand this from an example. Right? As we discussed in the socio-cultural anthropology, we have two topics. One, urbanization, and other is feminist movement. Right? And effect of these the effect of both of these you have to study on society as such. Now, if you look at the 4 questions that are mentioned here, first question that was asked in year 2020, what is the question? Explain the impact of feminist movement on universality of marriage and family structure. This is nothing but the society as such. So indirectly what they are asking, impact of feminist movement on society. Look at the question that was asked in 2016. What they are asking, discuss the impact of urbanization and feminist movement on family in India. Again, what it is, impact on society is being asked. 2013 question, discuss the impact of urbanization, feminist movement on family. Now, here if you look, these 3 questions, there is no difference as such. These are exact same questions, and if you have to formulate answer for these questions, there will not be a lot of changes. It would be exactly same. At least I can say 80 to 90% of the content, 80 to 90% of the structure of the answer would be same in all these 3 cases. And 4th question is also related to the same topic, and to large extent it is also same. Only what they are asking in the first part is that you have to explain, slightly elaborate upon feminist movement. Second part is exactly same as the last 3 question, discuss their impact on family, 2002. Now imagine if you have practiced these questions as such, if you've written 1 or 2 answers for these questions, there is a high probability that such questions will be repeated in the next year examination as well. So they will not have to put a lot of effort to elaborate on, to think on that how to structure the answer. You already will have a structure made in your mind. You simply have to recreate, reproduce in the examination hall, and that is what will make your burden easier, lessen your burden as far as the anthropology or optional preparation is concerned. So that is why I'm saying it, emphasizing it. Have good command over PYQs, and we will practice them thoroughly, and we will practice them in such a manner that any answer from that particular topic can be written in a good way. Try to attempt all the questions. That is also you have to do in the last stage when you're practicing model answers and you're giving tests and all that, because practicing time management becomes very critical, as you have to focus on not only writing good answer for few questions, but you have to write above average answer for majority of the questions and good answer to excellent answer for few of the questions, and that will ensure that you sail through anthropology UPSC optional in a flying color or with a flying color. That is all about this particular topic. I hope you got the idea behind what should be the right strategy for what you can call as dealing with the anthropology, and also why anthropology can be a very good choice as far as the UPSC option is concerned. Thank you very much.